Hello, I'm Alexei Sipachevsky, and this is the TT Maximum channel. Today I will talk about whether there are any differences between different types of table tennis blades and what exactly are these differences. People often ask if having multiple blades from the same company means that their parameters are completely identical. To answer this question, we need a clear definition of the term parameters. If someone manages to come up with such a definition, it will be a first in history. So, if you want to be the first, go ahead. Someone who asked me a question replied, "You're right, it's a silly term. These parameters are approximate and general, and everyone interprets them slightly differently. I'm more interested in practical concepts like speed, hardness, and control of the blade. I understand that these are all relative, but I hope that the differences in these indicators between identical blades in one batch are minimal. What can you say based on your experience?" I can say a lot. The question about the differences between blades of the same type has been asked since God created the earth. The first thing to discuss is what exactly are the differences between blade specimens. Let me explain with a simple example. Imagine two apples hanging on a tree branch. They are hanging next to each other on the same branch, which means they are the same type of apple, the same size, the same color, and the same degree of ripeness. Basically, they are identical apples, so to speak. And no, Adam and Eve didn't rush over to pick and eat them. The question here is, are there any differences between these apples? The answer to this question depends on what we mean by differences. If a scientist from a university studying the impact of the molecular composition of Martian meteorites on the life of red-spotted frogs were to study these two apples, he would put them on a scale and find that one weighs 200 grams, while the other weighs 208 grams. Are there differences? Yes, there are. Then he would carefully examine the chemical composition of the apples and discover 487.5 differences in milligrams of iron, calcium, and sulfuric acid. And one apple has a red spot on the right, while the other has it on the left. And for the scientist from the distant galaxy, or rather from that university, the answer would be obvious: the apples are significantly different. If you are from another galaxy, like this scientist, please like this video immediately. And if not, then like and subscribe. So, if these two apples were offered to an ordinary person who just wants to have a snack, both apples would be equally suitable for them. They wouldn't care about the weight of the apples or the micrograms of folic acid in them. And the situation with blades is pretty much the same as with apples in the example I just gave. So, if you're a scientist with a microscope and you want to study the thickness of the layers of the blade, the amount of glue between the layers, and so on, you'll be able to find a lot of differences between two blade specimens. But if you're just playing with the blade, you can say that there is no difference between different blade specimens. There is still a small difference, but I will tell you about it later, which one exactly. And now I want to summarize this question about the differences. When players discuss the differences in blades, one talks about something abstract, while the other talks about the specific application of that blade. One says that there are many differences, while the other says it doesn't matter to him, as he will play with any of them exactly the same. And these players don't understand each other. The thing is, one is referring to millimeters and milligrams, while the other is referring to practical application. And when you ask yourself if there are differences, ask yourself what exactly you mean. Speaking of blades, they do have some real differences. And there are also differences in perception among different people. Different people have different levels of sensitivity. One person finds it sweet, while another finds it sour. One person looks and sees a black square, while another sees a brilliant painting, even though it's just a normal square. One person says the racket is light, while another says it's heavy. One person feels the difference between different blades, while another takes any of them, goes to play, and doesn't even think about the differences. So the question is not only whether there is a difference between blade specimens, but also how sensitive the person playing with that blade is. If we translate our question into practical terms, in most cases there are no differences between blades. There are hypersensitive people who can feel even the slightest difference. There are very few such people, and it's not even known for sure if they really feel these nuances or if it's just their mind playing tricks on them after drinking alcohol the night before. In general, on one hand, There are people who don't feel or notice any differences and they don't care which racket to play with. And there are players who perceive two identical blades as different. But these are two extremes that are very rare. Most people do not feel these minor differences between blades in practice. But there are still noticeable differences. And before you learn about them, give a like if you haven't already. Based on my observations, the most noticeable difference between blade specimens is their weight. For many blades, if you weigh a large batch, the difference between the heaviest and lightest specimens can be plus or minus 10 g, meaning the average weight is 80 g, the lightest specimens are 70 g, and the heaviest are 90 g. This is not related to the quality or coolness of the brand. The difference can be seen in both cheap Chinese blades and expensive butterfly or Stiga blades simply because the wood used to make the blade is a living material, or at least it was alive when it was growing. Trees grow differently, and the layers of wood are not like parts of a spaceship, they are not selected with micron precision. If they were selected that way, it would increase the cost of the blade 10 times. Even these significant differences in weight worry a very small number of people, and those who are concerned about them know about it. When they go to a store to buy a blade, they say, "Tell me, do you have many copies of this blade? Please choose one for me that weighs this much, or choose the lightest or heaviest one for me." So if weight matters to you, you know it and you can ask us about it in the store. And if you are a beginner player or if this topic has not bothered you in practice until today, then there is no need to worry about hypothetical differences between blades in a vacuum. I am often asked this question. Personally, I have been playing for a long time and have played with a great many different blades. I had several copies of one blade, one for testing, another for regular play, and one for experiments. And I am asked if I feel the difference between the blades. I feel the difference only when there is more than a 10 g weight difference between the blades. Then the difference is quite noticeable when you play with one and then immediately switch to another. If there is no such weight difference, then no matter how many different blades I had in multiple copies, I changed them between each other and there was no difference. And even if there is a significant weight difference, but with different rubbers, you end up with different rackets of different weights. Therefore, it is not possible to say in advance which one is better for you, heavy or light. It is better to start with the desired weight of the racket. That is, if you know that you need a racket weighing 170 g, you should choose rubbers and a blade that match this weight. And if you don't know yet what weight of the racket is desirable for you, then don't worry about choosing the weight of the blade. I also suggest that you don't get too caught up in these types of questions and thoughts, but instead come to our store with specific requests. We will ask you some questions and help you choose the most suitable blade, rubber, and so on. So feel free to reach out, we will be happy to assist you.